I'm talking this afternoon with Ann Hamilton Fowler, a friend of mine who I became acquainted with by way of her work for women and children in Honduras several years ago. Um, Recently, she published a book which sort of outlined her life and also talked about her work in Honduras. And I'm happy to have her with me this afternoon to talk a little bit about her book, which I've read and I found interesting and fascinating. And what do you see as the motivation or primary motivations behind writing this particular book?
Well, I'd like to say that I was inspired by wanting to leave a legacy for my children or any of those things. But the truth of the matter is I did it on a dare. I did it on a dare because two of my best friends who spent considerable time at my cottage over the years were moving out to BC. And I knew there was going to be a hole in my summer. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be so bored, you know. And so some of my friends said, why don't you write your memoir? We've been trying to tell you to do that for years. And so I thought, okay. And, you know, although I certainly was not expecting to write a Pulitzer Prize, I thought, well, maybe I'll earn a little bit of money off it and I can put that into my Honduran programs. And then, of course, when COVID hit and I was stranded in Honduras for 19 months, I had nothing to do but write and finish the book. So that's how it got done.
Okay. One of the themes of your book that I see in the stories that you tell is transformation, and that occurred at several stages in your life. And that's a healthy thing, to be able to change and adapt to circumstances and continue to grow. Could you comment on what you see as some of the key events in your life that caused you to change direction and how it sort of influenced you?
Okay, well, I would probably say that there were two major things. One was good, one was bad. The traumatic experience I went through was at 20, and then the resulting lifestyle that I took without boundaries took me down one path, and sometimes a very risky one and not a very good one. Then the good change occurred when I went to Honduras for the first year in 1993. Where I had an experience and the results were life-changing in all possible ways, mental, physical, spiritual, behavioral patterns. And I would say those are the two major things that have impacted me over my life. Two drastically different things, of course.
Sure. Your book shows a very strong connection to family, both in the pictures that you published and also in some of your writing. And in your later years, you've extended that family to include a lot of friends and children and women in Honduras. Can you comment on what you see as the most satisfying contributions you and others working with you have made to your now international family?
Well, I would say, I mean, the programs that we developed in the community, and I'm not going to go into that here, but there were programs in education, programs in healthcare within my community. And 20 years later, I'm still seeing the benefits of the people that started in that program. Then the other thing I would think as a result was the friendships. I call Iris, who is, you will read about in the book, and Melvin, who is the director of the clinic in Progreso, my Honduran daughter and son. And my children, my own children here back in Canada, are in contact with them all the time, and they feel the same. So I would say that, you know, the programs, the ongoing programs that had so many people contributing to them. I mean, with Dr. Bill Kerr, the dental program for 14 years for all the children. For example, Dr. Lou Scalone, who I write about in the book, and the ophthalmology program. The bilingual school that we built for Iris. there were just a lot of programs, and it's just kind of an ongoing thing. And the most gratifying part is to see the results now. And for example, I had a young man, Iris and I ran into a young man maybe 2 years ago, who was visiting El Porvenir, and he had been in our early healthy living programs at elementary school. He'd gone on to high school, went to university, and he was now in law school in New Orleans. And
Wow.
he remembered all the stuff we had done. And so that's an exception, of course, but it was good. It was good to hear that and hear that somebody pushed through.
You've worn many hats. Given the title of your book, you've been a stewardess, a successful entrepreneur, philanthropist, grandmother, among other things. Is there any favorite hat that you recall?
Now, that's a loaded question, and you know it. How could I possibly compare my children and my grandchildren, which is a loving journey, to my jobs? But so I enjoyed all of them, but I especially love being a grandma.
Thank you. Well, you have a lot of interesting stories about those aspects of your life, and I enjoyed reading about them. I found your ability to write with a sense of humor particularly refreshing. And I also found you to be realistic and optimistic. That's a rare combination. What characteristics in your own character have you found to be most valuable, given the roller coaster nature of your life, the ups and downs?
Well, I'm not sure that my family and all my friends would agree with this, but what I consider to be the innate qualities, really, that I've always been this way. I'm a glass half full person, and there's no such thing, no such word in my vocabulary as can't. And what else? I always have a plan B. And of course, in Honduras, we often go to plan X, but you always have to have a plan B, you know. And I don't know, I've always had the ability to think on my feet. And that may be a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know, but it served me well.
Well, certainly the book shows you to be a very resourceful person. And I think that's a valuable attribute that others would like to emulate. In looking back on your life and the variations you've had in it, do you have any advice to give to young women who find themselves recovering from trauma or trying to transform their lives in a different direction? That sometimes can be fairly difficult for people.
You know, I gave some thought. You wrote me that question. I gave a lot. I had more difficulty with that one than any. Above all, I think what I would say is be kind. Be kind to yourself and to others. Don't beat yourself up for something you did years ago, either that you were responsible for doing or felt responsible that it happened to you. You let it happen to you. Remember, what's done is done. You can't go back and undo, no matter how much you regret it. But what you can impact is how the fallout occurs. You know, how you react to the fallout and how you handle that. You know, if you make a mistake, apologize and go on and try to do better. But don't make yourself the fall guy if something happened to you and beat yourself up half your life saying, it's my fault for what happened to me. You weren't the one responsible, the other person was. And probably above all, and this is what I really came out with, and of course I'm talking for me, above all, you've got to talk to somebody about it. My friend Carolyn was just here and just left, and she's one of my oldest friends. And we were talking about this. And one of the things that I did in my life is I didn't talk to a lot of people about my problems. And you read the book, so you know that. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I made in my life. I should have talked to somebody, because what I found from writing this book, regardless of whether it sells, regardless of whether people like it, it worked for me. And it made me look at things I hadn't looked at in over 70 years, and things that I should have looked at many, many years ago and dissected and learned from it instead of just kind of, oh, well, tomorrow's another day and we'll gloss it over and go on. You know, I think I talked about, not sharing with my parents some things when a particularly traumatic incident had occurred. That was the worst thing we could have done, all of us, because they were hurting, I was hurting, and we just kind of carried on. So I guess the advice I would give to somebody who has suffered any kind of traumatic thing, especially young women, for heaven's sakes, talk to somebody. Doesn't have to be your parents, but find somebody that is a friend, even a stranger that you can vent on and unload, get rid of it. Don't carry it around the rest of your life. So that's kind of what I came up with.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that's good advice. I found it to be useful to seek the advice of others, and sometimes just telling your story to others in itself is
Exactly.
therapeutic. So,
That in itself, yes.
I enjoyed reading your book. It was a lot of fun, and I particularly enjoyed the humor and the ability to look at yourself honestly and to talk about the things that changed your life and transformed them and allowed you to adapt to circumstances.